everyone, and welcome back to another True Crime Tuesday. I apologize in advance if the audio quality isn't that good. My microphone is acting weird. This is the second time I'm recording this video. I can no longer hear myself through my earphones in the microphone, and it's recording way too loud. Now, this is what happened with the previous one that broke after 3 weeks, so I really hope this doesn't break because I can't keep getting new microphones. I don't know if I'm doing anything wrong with it. I don't think so. I can't think of what it might be, but I don't know. It's not recording the way it should, so I hope the audio's okay. Before I get started with today's case, I wanted to remind you all that you can find the links to all my social media in the description box below, as well as the link to my Tingles app and my Patreon. I have some really cool true crime video rewards on there in case you're interested. I would really, really appreciate the support. So today's case is about Katelin Akens. I heard about this case just a few weeks ago. I listened to a podcast on it and I watched some YouTube videos about it. And it's really interesting. So, Katelin was 19 years old when she disappeared on September 5th, 2015 from Spotsylvania, Virginia. Now, Katelin was very smart. She graduated high school when she was only 16 years old, and she had a very tight relationship with her sister. So when Katelin was growing up, she had a really good friend named Amber, and they grew up together. They lived next to each other. They went to school together, and when Amber was 11 years old, she moved to Arizona. Now they stayed in touch all this time, and after a few years, their friendship turned into a relationship. So when Katelin was 18, she decided to take the leap and move to Arizona to be with Amber. Now she felt guilty about leaving her family so young, so to compensate for that, she talked to them all day long. She would text her mother, Lisa, and her sister all the time. They would literally have whole conversations over text all the time. So, the next year, her sister had a baby, and she decided to come back to Virginia to see her new nephew. She spent a lot of time with family. She was really happy to be there. Her nephew was only 2 weeks old, so she was really excited. And a few days before she left, she decided to visit some friends that she hadn't been able to catch up with yet. And they drank a lot, and it got really late. So she decided to spend the night there, and she planned to go home the next day. And on her last day, she just spent time with family, just chilled a bit, said goodbye to everyone. And she seemed to be just happy and, the way she always was. So on the day that she left, her mother had to work, so she couldn't drop Katelin off at the airport. So she asked her ex-stepfather, James, to drive her to the airport. Now, she had a really good relationship with James, so even though he was her stepfather and her ex-stepfather at this point, he had always been in their lives. So when the girls were little, whenever they needed something, he was always there. When Lisa had problems paying a bill, he would help out. Katelin's dad left when she was 3 years old, so he was a father figure to her from when she was very little, and he was a dad to her. So he had to work early that afternoon. So he said that he had to drop her off at the airport quite early. It was a 60-mile drive over. It was a 50-mile drive back to where he worked. So she would be at the airport about 4 hours before her flight, and she said that was fine. That, she didn't mind waiting. Lisa and told her that he had dropped Katelin off at the airport. She asked him how traffic was. He said it was fine. It was a normal conversation. Then, a few minutes later, around 2 p.m., Katelin texted Lisa to let her know that she was dropped off at the airport, but that her phone was dying and she would catch up with her later. Now, at the same time, Katelin sent a text to Amber to say that there was a problem with her flight and she wasn't going to be able to take this flight. Amber thought this was really odd, so she called Lisa to ask her what was going on, and Lisa immediately became very scared because she knew that this was the only flight that day and there was no other flight that Katelin could take. So she started frantically calling Katelin, but Katelin didn't pick up. She then started calling friends and family, told them the story, and asked them to please try and get in contact with Katelin. They all called her multiple times, but no one could reach her. So when Lisa got home from work, she called James, who dropped her off. She wanted to know where exactly he dropped her off, and he told her that he didn't actually drop her off at the airport. He dropped her off at the Springfield Mall because Katelin didn't want to wait at the airport for 4 hours. She wanted to kill some time, so she wanted to be dropped off there. She said to James, it's only a few miles from the airport. There's a metro I can take. So he gave her some money for the metro, and he watched her walk into the mall. Now, Lisa immediately thought, this is not like my daughter. Like, Katelin wouldn't do something like that, and she wouldn't even know that mall was there. Like, it was in a completely different part of Virginia. It was in a very busy part of Virginia, and Lisa said that when the girls were little, they avoided this area as much as they could. Also, Katelin hadn't taken the metro since she was 6 years old, so she wouldn't even know how to take the metro to get from there to the airport. So, they kept trying to get in touch with her, and then at 7:15 p.m., she sent a very cryptic message. She sent 2 messages to her mom. I'm with a friend. I need to be alone. Her family immediately thought that she didn't send those because Katelin hated sending 2 messages for one thing. Like, she would always try to pack everything she could into one big message. Shortly after she sent this text to her mom, she also sent a Facebook message to Amber and said, I can't come back. I cheated on you. They still didn't believe this came from her because she was such an open book. She was really close to her family. They could, they would have been able to tell if something was wrong, and she seemed fine the whole trip. She seemed happy up until the moment she left for the airport. So they called the police, but the police said if she chose to be missing, it was her right. She was 19 years old. She was allowed to make her own choices. So Lisa decided to go to the police station the next day, 2 days later, to report her as a missing person. Now, authorities kept telling the family that she probably just went away for a few days or even a few weeks to be by herself and think, and that she would come home. But her family didn't believe this, and they were right. So while Lisa was filling out some paperwork, she was suddenly pulled into a room. Authorities told her that Katelin's luggage had been found on the side of the road in a ditch 50 miles from the airport and only a few miles from James's house. The suitcase was broken, and please believe it was thrown out of a moving car. All her belongings were still in the suitcase, including her phone charger and her money, but her phone, all of her clothes, and her diploma was missing. So she never even made it more than 10 miles away from James's house. Now, when she was with her family, she told them that she had decided to go to cosmetology school in Arizona. So, she graduated high school at 16, but she didn't go to college because these are details that I left out because I didn't want the case to be too long. I believe that she wanted to study something, but it didn't work out because she then decided she was going to move to Arizona to be with Amber. And while she was there, she decided to go to cosmetology school. She always loved doing people's hair, and she just loved working with hair, so she decided to go to cosmetology school. She was really excited about this, but she had told all her family members to make sure to remind her that she had to take her diploma with her because it was the last step she needed to do to finish her registration with the college, and that was missing from her suitcase. So the police questioned multiple witnesses, including James, and they tried to get surveillance footage from the neighborhood, from the airport, and from the mall where James said he dropped her off. They searched all the land and the water with all the possible tools they had, and they didn't find a shred of her clothes or any trace of her. So they decided to talk to the friends that she had spent some time with a few days before. And they found out some shocking information. It was a couple, a man and a woman. And the couple said that they had been drinking a lot. They were really drunk. And one thing led to another, and they kind of had a thing together, if you know what I mean. And the next morning, they were all really embarrassed, and they felt horrible. The man felt so bad that he left work early to go home. And he said when he came home, Katelin was still there. So he took her for a walk, but she didn't say much. She was visibly embarrassed. So he decided to drop her off at home. Now authorities thought, well, maybe the sexual encounter with a ton of regret was a possible motive to do something to Katelin. But they were quickly ruled out because they were very forthcoming with this information, and they said, look, we were all embarrassed about it. We weren't angry at Katelin. We didn't see this as something that would ruin our relationship. It was just something that we thought, man, we really wish we hadn't done this, but we moved on. However, this changed the potential that the messages sent to Amber and Lisa were in fact from Katelin. Her family believed they weren't, but the fact that the message to Amber said she cheated on her, nobody knew that except for Katelin and those friends. The authorities then also found another message she had sent to one of her friends stating that she didn't want to be in either Arizona or Virginia. This friend later said that they'd sent multiple messages back and forth, and that she told him that she felt really depressed, that she'd been crying all day, that she felt like she cheated on Amber, and that she was a bad person. This was really shocking to her family because she seemed so happy. She was sad to leave because she wanted to see her nephew grow up. She never showed any signs of distress, so this made everyone think that maybe she did run away after all. So when police finally got their hands on her phone records and on the security footage, everything changed. When Katelin sent the message to her mother saying she had been dropped off at the airport, which afterwards everyone assumed she sent while she was at the mall, turns out it was actually sent in Fredericksburg, which is where James worked. And it was only 5 miles away from where her suitcase was found. The security footage also didn't show James dropping off Katelin at the mall at all. However, James was really helpful in the investigation. He always came in for interviews when they asked him to. He gave them all the information they needed. So they eventually asked James to take a polygraph test, which he agreed to. But soon after, he said that after speaking to his lawyer, he didn't want to anymore. He was being looked at as a suspect and he didn't like it. So police said, we're not looking at you as a suspect. We've already ruled out other family members and friends. We just want you to take this polygraph did you lie to me about dropping her off at the airport? Why did you then lie to me about dropping her off at the mall? And why are you no longer cooperating with the authorities? And all James said was, I've said everything I needed to say to the authorities. I'm not saying any more. And from that day onwards, he stopped cooperating with authorities altogether. And to this day, he still doesn't. So they got a search warrant for his home and all the surrounding buildings and his car. They searched for 8 hours. They searched every spot they could possibly find. And they didn't find any evidence of foul play happening to Katelin. So then they thought, well, maybe he didn't do anything to her. Maybe he just helped her run away. So they checked his phone records to see where he was when he sent the message to Lisa saying he had dropped Katelin off at the airport. And it turns out that he sent it from his home. His phone pinged multiple times that day, all from home. He was home all day. He didn't even go to work. He told Katelin that he had to drop her off 4 hours in advance because he had to work early in the afternoon. And they talked to his supervisor, and he said that James had called out that day, and he was just home all day. To make things even stranger, he was a very tech-savvy guy, and he installed his own program on his phone to prevent police from accessing anything else on his phone or any further phone records. They even brought in multiple experts to crack this program, and they all failed. So he was really good at protecting his phone, and he obviously had information on there that he didn't want police to find. So the message that James sent to Lisa and the message that Katelin supposedly sent to Lisa were sent within a few minutes from each other, but they were sent a few miles from each other. Now, there's no way that James could have sent the message from his home and then made it to the other location in time to send that message. So they were definitely sent by 2 different people. Almost like they agreed on a time that they would send the message. Like they said, hey, I'm going to send the message at this time. You send it at that time because that makes it believable that I dropped her off at the airport. Or maybe Katelin made that suggestion. I don't know. What's also strange is that James never went back to work after that day. He called out that day, and then he just never went back. He didn't work for 6 months, and when he eventually did go back to work, he got another job. So, I'm going to talk about some theories now. The first theory is one that I'm not saying that I don't believe it, but there's a part of it that I don't understand. I'm going to mention it just because I don't want people to say, hey, you missed this big detail, but I don't think it's right. So, her sister believes that maybe she met someone online. While she never mentioned anyone else in her life and she seemed fine, she did have an encrypted message app on her phone and they were never able to crack it, so she could have been talking to anyone. She thinks maybe she wanted to meet this person on that day and they had bad intentions. She did text her mom to say that she was with a friend, but all her known friends were questioned and none of them were suspects. Maybe she wasn't happy in Arizona because aside from Amber, she didn't have anyone there, so it could be that she was trying to find friends online or people who understood her situation. And we know she wasn't happy in her current situation and she wanted out as soon as possible. Now, James, if he had known this all along and was trying to help her run away, he was still a father figure to her, so I don't know if he would have just allowed her to meet up with some random stranger. So either he did, and he realized something bad happened to her, and he feels too guilty to come forward, or she met up with a stranger never found. Her phone wasn't in the suitcase, and it was used a few times that day to send messages from. Both the podcast and the number of videos I watched on YouTube mentioned this, but none of them question how they got the phone. And I searched for it everywhere online. For as far as I know, they didn't have the phone. My initial thought was, well, maybe they found the encrypted message app a few days before she left. But the fact that you said we were never able to crack it means that police obviously had her phone and was trying to crack it, and that to me I don't think is right, because they didn't have her phone. Also, I couldn't find any articles online where the sister had said this, so I don't know where they got this information from. I don't think the meeting a stranger online theory is out of the realm of possibility, but this encrypted message app on her phone, I don't know where this information came from, because they didn't have her phone. Now, the fact that the suitcase was so obviously thrown out of a moving car means there were definitely two people at play, because there is no way that a driver could have thrown the suitcase out of the passenger seat window into a ditch while driving. But whether those two people were James and Katelin or two other people, we don't know. The missing items from the suitcase are quite possibly a clue, because her clothes and her diploma were missing, and those are very personal items. Now, we know that James doesn't have them because his house and his car were searched and they weren't found anywhere. A stranger could have taken them as a trophy, but then why leave all her money? Like, robbery obviously wasn't a motive here. I don't know why you would steal other things but not the money. The more likely scenario is that Katelin took them, because a diploma is something that's very personal. Like, she graduated when she was 16. She would have been very proud of that. But the money again really bothers me here, because why wouldn't she take the money? If she was planning to run away, it was cash, so it wasn't traceable. Like, that could have bought her food for a couple of weeks or a motel room for a couple of nights. Like, if she was really running away to start a new life, why wouldn't you take the money? Now, Lisa believes that James did something to her and his mother helped him do it. She lived in a house owned by James a few miles away from him, so she would have been able to send those other text messages. At the time they were sent, she would have been able to make it to that location. And they had such a relationship that she would help him. Police wanted to get a search warrant for her house, but they weren't able to, because while it was owned by James, he wasn't officially a resident there, and she wasn't under suspicion, only he was, so they had no reason to search her house. Some friends have said, and take this with a grain of salt because this is from Reddit and not everything on Reddit is true. They said that James was abusive when the girls were younger, and that Katelin only went with him because she didn't have anyone else. I don't necessarily believe that. Lisa said that he was still in their lives when the girls were younger, that whenever they needed something, he would do it for them. Lisa still needed him a lot, and I think if he was abusive to the girls, that she would have severed ties with them altogether when they were younger. And I don't think a mother would let her daughter go for a 60-mile drive with someone who she knew was abusive towards her. Maybe she didn't have anyone else, but I just don't think her mother would allow her to do that. So I don't think he was abusive. From everything I've read, he had a really good relationship with them, and he was very involved with them. So I don't know what I believe. My first instinct was that she probably ran away and James is covering for her, even with the risk of going to jail himself, which would mean that he loved her a lot. But I don't really think she ran away anymore, because I don't know why she wouldn't take the money. But also, the thing that happened with that couple, I don't think that's enough reason to run away. I think you can be upset enough about that you want to go away for a few days or a few weeks and just be like, I want to be alone, I have to reevaluate my life, something like that. But she's been missing for 30 years. think you run away to start a new life for something like that, especially not because she was super close to her sister. She was always in contact with her family. She had this new nephew that she wanted to be around. I just can't see her leaving behind everyone she knows because of one night of a bad decision. So, I don't really think it's a likely theory. Also, why throw your suitcase out of a car? Like, if I understand if you're running away that you don't want to take it, but why wouldn't you hide it? Or why wouldn't you ask James to take it with him so he could burn it or something? Like, why throw it out of a car in an area where it's so obviously going to be found? If you don't want it to be found, don't throw it there. That really leaves the only other possibility that James did something to her, but I wouldn't know what his motive was because for all I know, he was really close to her. It could be that she met a stranger online and that James helped her with that and that, you know, he did something to her. But I believe she would only meet this stranger online and do it all secretive with James if she was planning to run away with him, which, like I said, I don't believe is the case. If you're just going to meet a stranger online to see what they're like, you don't do it that secretive, and you wouldn't tell your ex-stepfather about it. You'd probably tell your sister, who you're really close to. So, I think it's blatantly obvious that James knows what happened to her, but he's not telling, and they don't have any evidence to